Welcome back to the Ygartua Art Chronicles podcast, exploring the life and career of painter Paul Ygartua. Today we rejoin Paul and Joanne for part 2 of the Beachcomber interview, talking about the giant mural and also the boardroom commission that followed, The Circle of Life.
But next, then next was his boardroom. Then he, right?
He had a boardroom which he'd had a dome ceiling built in it for me to paint a fresco. So so that was quite an interesting 12-foot diameter dome. And he'd seen Mark Chagall's dome in the Opera House in Paris. We'd seen it as well about
with Talon
a few years earlier.
In the 80s we were
So
there.
I knew exactly what he was talking about. And so that's, with the fantasy, he wanted it to be more of a fantasy sort of a theatrical feel to it. And so I was using, masked people and definite.
He wanted the, like Chagall as well, I believe, had the
angels,
Arc de Triomphe and all
that.
that.
The Arc
as
de
well.
Triomphe.
That's
all
right,
the main features of.
You had from Lincoln to the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah. Lots
Keith
of
and Scott had masks.
They wanted to be in it, so I had to paint his face as a clown. He looks like the clown, and then his wife had a white mask on.
But you had the Sacré-Cœur,
I had
Big
the
Ben,
I had a lot of different.
Madonna, the Trevi Fountain, Cirque Soleil.
Yeah.
And actually, if you really look, you can see Ximenes's Mrs. Rice,
very
and the
slightly,
totem, very faint in the background.
But that was interesting, and my touch, which gave it the whole interesting feel, was painting the wooden frame. It had a plaster edge all the way around the circle, and I decided that I wanted it to look
just like his,
like a gilt type frame. So I actually painted the design on it. It took me probably a whole day just doing that. Just doing the
like
frame
Chagall's, the same.
That's right.
like the ornate, sort of gold leaf type.
But it was crazy. Feel. Again, if you look at that closely, you got an eye and you know exactly.
To make it look like a carved sort of frame.
But the little lines between are all perfect. And then when you looked at it, it absolutely looked like gilt wood, like a wooden. Antique frame. I mean, you just thought it was.
Yeah, it did look pretty good.
Yeah, it was just...
It helped give that same, I guess, ambience to the painting itself.
And then, as always, I said, how can you do this? It must be your silver, and goldsmithing.
Yeah, okay,
and they always say, no, I just do it. But what do you mean? It's no
the
big
interesting
deal.
thing about this room, that was his boardroom, was that he had a big sort of velvet curtain.
Dark maroon
curtain that was the door. Instead of a door, he just had a curtain. But when you were inside and you're talking, everything echoed.
Yeah.
It was
possibly
quite
not.
amazing.
Was it good or sort of perturbing?
But if you're having a business
if you're doing
meeting,
the speech, it would be good. Yeah, people would definitely hear you.
maybe if he's talking.
But for music, what a room to play music in, the sound effect.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting, yeah.
And so I can see from the photo you've sent me, there's a massive face on the right-hand side. What's that? I can't quite see the edge of it. There's a horse, and above that there's a frowning sort of...
Was it like a god face?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah,
it wasn't Madonna, was
No,
it?
this was like the devil sort of idea coming in there.
The big, like, lion.
That's right, it was like a big
sort of
lion's face, yeah.
Okay.
That again was he had his ideas, and then
I can't remember exactly what I was calling these figures and that, but he had the ideas of certain things, and I put some in myself.
Yeah, but I loved that bit, and it was called
the clowns, the Cirque du Soleil, the red striped outfits on those guys. Yeah. That was his idea as well, wanting that in there.
And they called it the Circle of Life.
Circle of Life, yeah.
He did want to buy the sketch, but I keep those.
We kept the sketch.
Things for.
And as far as you know, that's still in existence.
Yeah. Oh, that won't fade at all. That's got no no problem in there, hidden away. I think it took me 10 days to do that.
And that was a while after, or was it? Or was it just straight after?
Maybe
a little bit
pretty
after.
close.
They had to build the ceiling
maybe it
and
was
have
a
it
couple of
ready.
months later.
Probably a couple of months later.
Oh, yeah. So basically at the same time, yeah.
Yeah, but from this, we actually knew another chap who was in the construction business.
Well, it was one of his close friends.
One of his close friends.
Builder.
Had seen me working on this mural for the past month or so. And he had a building in Westminster. And he said, well, I'd like you to do a mural on my building.
Of the old
He wanted the old West End houses painted on the front of his building so that his business looked like it was inside one of these old wooden houses that we have in the West End here. And that was the next job I did for him.
And those went how high? Because he had quite a large area.
That was again 25 feet high, the building.
So they were above his building.
Yeah.
So how did he have
No,
that?
they were above his doorway. Right above his doorway, right to the top of the ceiling. I made the roofs of the building with the chimneys. And then it went down an angle. And then I had another building. So I did two wooden structures against his wall.
And this guy also at the home show, so he was always on TV or announcing things. And so, of
he
course...
was about 6'6", must have weighed about 300 pounds. He was a gigantic chap.
Yeah, he's a pretty big guy. And he very...
and then he's in charge of the rodeo in another town outside of Vancouver, Cloverdale. And he said, there's a big building there, a warehouse structure. Why don't you paint a rodeo scene with
because
a cowboy?
The rodeo was right there.
Yeah.
And then inside were all the
the rodeo was going on
things.
around, and this was the building where they had exhibitors in there selling their products. So
we did a show as well.
And we did a show there as well. So I did a cowboy on a horse and
it was
Western scene.
It was from a famous painting. Not Russell, but it was somebody else.
Maybe a Remington, I think. I'm not sure.
We got to see the rodeo as well.
Yeah, we got to watch the bull riders and the rodeo guys.
And they're all in their cowboy outfits, everybody. That was it's a lot of fun too. Well, you did that mural. How long was that?
Oh, God.
It wasn't long, maybe...
It took 3 days, maybe.
Yeah, 3-4 days.
Not long.
Yeah.
I had to get it ready for the day of the show, but I think it was 3 days I did that.
Yeah. Going back to I wanted to ask a few more questions about Beachcomber and just get into it a bit more, and just wondered how you felt about it compared to, looking back, it's the biggest, and you'd probably mastered the techniques in some way. How did it compare to the 2 or 3 that you'd done before? And did you feel differently about it? Did it? Tell me a bit about it.
A little differently, because I knew, of course, they were all famous faces. So when you're painting famous faces,
You've got to get it right.
Almost, you betcha. That's about it. You don't get it right, and even a couple of times, I think Keith came out and said, he's not quite right. You gotta know, So, you have to have it dead on. You have to be recognizable. So that part made it more important that every damn detail was dead on. Whereas other ones I'd done, nobody knew the faces. They were just ethnic from Africa. They could have had them a little off, and it wouldn't be noticeable,
Yeah.
And we do have a photograph which I'd forgot, but the first study of Diana, which he did approve, had the hat, and it
didn't look right.
No, and
so I had to paint over Diana and do her face again, making her more sympathetic or
no.
I put a crown on her head. That's right.
Tiara.
And I actually got real glass to put in the tiara to make them look like diamonds.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they probably fell out, but
did you glue them?
I glued them. I glued them in.
That's amazing.
Yeah. to make it look almost realistic, But I don't think they lasted more than a few years, because I think the next time I went, they'd fallen off or been knocked off or something. The weather had eaten away at it. Of course, the one for Expo was a little different as well, with the feeling, because of course it was my son and my daughter were in the mural, which made it more personal,
And it's interesting looking at the legends side, because you've got Chief Dan George is sort of, he looks kind of like an overreaching figure, checking, he looks more important.
Yeah.
Not saying more important, but he's sort of,
yes.
he has a certain regard towards them.
Well, of course, on the perspective that you've got in your photograph, it looks like he's 3 times bigger than the others. He's actually it's something like 15 foot instead of 10 feet.
But it's always important, Keith Scott as well, having close relations with the natives, also a big collector of native art. It's very important that the natives, not only respected as always, but to be first.
Yeah, he was. I wanted to make him, in a sense, as you mentioned, someone who was overseeing the rest of the people, in a sense, looking over them in a spiritual way, maybe.
That's it. That's what it looks like, doesn't it? It looks like a father figure.
That's why I have him looking that way, but the others are basically looking towards him. Kennedy and Diana and Einstein and Gandhi. They sort of basically are looking towards him, and he's looking back at them.
And he looks kind of he looks kind of Mount Rushmore-esque.
Exactly.
He's sort of permanent. Like a solid father figure to a nation. Yeah, it's interesting.
That's an interesting way to put it, for sure.
Well, the one I did. Now the other murals I've done, the ones I did in Ely, Nevada, that was about. That was 100. How big was that? That was 150 foot long.
I think we get to that next time.
Yeah. But that one also had faces that were recognisable in the town that I had to make sure were dead right.
That's even more difficult, because you probably didn't know them.
Well, they're still alive.
True. But I mean,
they'd come and say, "Hey,
that was
what the hell's
united by our children."
Yeah,
quite.
Joanne and I used to argue in front of that mural about whether I was getting it right or wrong. And one day we were arguing, and the cops came.
I had the brush for some reason in my
She
hand.
was waving the brush at me, and these cops pulled up and jumped out and said, "What's the problem here? What's the problem?"
In the States, wow. If it was today, they did jump out.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought I was easy.
Today they'd probably take us away or something. God. I don't know.
Once they realised I was the artist, they said, "Oh, bloody artist," having a fight with his wife.
If you did something like this today, there'd be plenty of discussions about whether this is relevant, whether that person should be up there, whether this person was related to a slave owner, etc., etc., etc. Was there any scandal at the time?
The only one scandal, and that was on the other wall, was I'd done a face. Yeah, the baseball player who eventually was under bad, what was it, Joanna, under some sort of scrutiny for something or other, and I had to paint him out.
That's
really?
You did.
Yeah. Keith said, "You can't have him up there now. He's a rotten son of a gun, or he's done this." He's a
just
crook.
as well we forgot the name, actually.
He did something illegal or did something against the sport, or so. I don't know what it was now, but evidently he'd lied about his something to do with his scores or something or other. Anyway, he was in bad repute. So I had to paint him out and put someone. Who was the other guy I put in his face?
What, the French guy?
The famous baseball player, very famous.
Not Babe Ruth,
famous.
no.
Yeah, Babe Ruth. Oh. Yeah, I put Babe Ruth in his place. I've got the photograph of he's in it. The other guy's there right now in the photograph I'm looking at. Really? But I had to paint him out and put Babe Ruth in.
For gosh sakes.
That's right.